You join the Marines, you've got that aspiration to earn your Green Beret. That aspiration's still there. It's not gone away. Yes, it might be delayed slightly, but you work with me. Let's work together. Let's get you back fitter, stronger, better prepared. So when you re-enter training, you're going to go and smash it. And most of the young recruits respond really positively to that. They save the hardest for last, of course, the Marines. They throw in the commando tests at the end. There's 4 of them. First one's a 9-mile speed march, carrying all your kit and equipment. You start as a team, you finish as a team. If you don't get in the time, then you all fail together. You have to take responsibility for each other. And it's a team squadded effort. The next one is the Tarzan and Assault course, the one I spoke to you about. It's 2 assault courses together, one of which is 30 feet up in the trees. We had the England rugby team on that. No safety equipment, no helmet. If you fall out the tree and land on your head, it's a bad day at the office, I suppose. You just pick yourself up, climb the tree and get back on with it. And next one is the endurance course, 2.5 miles of underwater tunnels with obstacles such as Peter's Pool, the Sheep Dip, the Crocodile Pit. And the final one is our famous 30-mile march across the entirety of Dartmoor.
Beyond.
Yeah. Would let me see what it was maybe like for my family, my wife, the people who loved me, what it must have been like for them when I said that I'm off to a war zone and I'm not really sure if I'm coming back. We had a lad shot, dead, in our troop. His name's Adam Gilbert, and that's still painful.
Okay, Scotty, so if we look at where we've got to, right, you've arrived at Lympstone, having got on the train, got off the train, and you can remember with acute sharpness all the things that happened to you in those first 5-10 minutes, and then you go into training. So give me a bit of an overview about the training. What did the training involve? What sticks out in your memory most of all about that training? Because I should also mention, you're miles out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, you are. There's no doubts about that whatsoever. Everything's new. I suppose a funny moment is that because the Marines acknowledge a lot of the young men that have just got off that train may have just done so straight from home, straight from school, no experience of anything. They teach you how to do everything. They teach you, then they coach you, then they mentor it. And that's the same. They explain something, EDIP. Explain, demonstrate. They ask you to imitate, and then you practice. And that's for every single skill that you learn all the way through your entire career in the Marines. A funny moment is that they show you how to shower.
Yes, I know.
And, they have one of the instructors there who's bollocky buff. He's got his green beret on, wearing it with pride in the shower. And he teaches you how to shower. And most basic fundamental skill that's linked to cleanliness. But they don't just show you how to shower. They explain the importance of why you have to keep clean. Because you can't be a liability on the battlefield, ultimately, is what it's about. So you have to look after your kit and equipment, so when you need it, it works properly. And you need to look after yourself, because if you pick up an infection in the field on operations, then you will need 2 other people to look after you and get you off that battlefield, which then reduces our operational work that we're doing, and that capability is then lessened. So you have to look after your team by making sure that you're on the ball with all of that. What starts with administration, the logistics, the planning, the preparation, so that, we do truly strive for excellence in the most menial of tasks. Sometimes Marine training can be boring because of repetition. But that repetition reinforces how to do things right. And that continues. You do the same things over and over and over again. You train hard. You understand that, so you can fight easy. And that's not the first time I've spoken about that. I get to speak to people all over the world now, across all these different industries, hundreds of organisations. Sometimes I see a senior person who'll stand up in front of their team and say, I want you to give me 120%. We've got a big quarter coming up. We really need to step our game. I need 150% out here. Well, got to be honest, that wouldn't necessarily motivate me. Honest, especially if I'd been given everything anyway, and now you want another 50% out of me? Well, but Scotty's slant on this, and it's linked to our training, is I think the most that you can ever demand of yourself or ask of the people you have the privilege to lead is everything that they've got. Their own individual 100%. Whatever that looks like. And we're all at different stages of the game, aren't we?
But it's so much so that it's dropped into people's vocabulary now. People, when they want to agree with you, they say 100%.
Yeah.
And I'm going, do you really realise what 100% means?
I think the most that you can give is everything you got, your own individual 100%.
Yeah.
Right? But I do believe that you can grow your 100%. The way the Marines do it, having gone on to go and be one of the lead trainers at Limpstone, is that we take our young people to a point where, normally physically, where they feel as though they can't go anymore. And then what we do, we ask them to go from the realms of the physical into the realms of mental fortitude, and ask them, metaphorically, to take one step forward, climb 1 more metre higher, crawl 1 more metre on the ground, and you grow your 100% just a little that day.
Okay,
the
Scotty.
following day, we'll take them to their new 100%, and we'll ask them to grow just a little bit more the next day. You times that by 32 weeks of the longest and hardest training in the world. You times that by 32 years of my experience leading Britain's commandos around the globe. You can truly smash the glass ceiling of anything you ever thought was possible. And that's where I've found some of those most impossible dreams can come true.
So what did you find hardest during that beginning of training?
I loved every second of it, literally. I did. Now, I found all of it hard. Most of the things I found the hardest was the new skills that you're learning, because they teach you an incredible amount. It's not just weapon training. You learn navigation, you learn signals training and how to communicate. You learn to be part of a team. All the different lessons that you have are interspersed with very, very hard physical training exercises, mostly in the gym to start with, because you realise subsequently that you know they're building up your combat effectiveness, so that eventually you can progress to wearing kit and doing all these very, very arduous sort of endurance events, and ultimately building up towards what during training you don't really see much beyond earning that green beret. You know that the very last week of training you've got those commando tests to do. Everybody knows that. And you hope that you get to a position. You do everything you can to get to that position whereby you get a chance of completing those commando tests and earning that green beret. That's probably as far as you dare to look at, especially at the start of training. It seems a very, very long way away. So probably the hardest thing I had to deal with in the initial weeks, in answer to your question, is I got a bit homesick. Not that I talk about this much anymore either, but at the time, you do 8 weeks, the first 8 weeks of training, mostly physical training in the gym, and then you're learning lots of new skills on top of that. So you're tired all the time. Very limited sleep. Burning an incredible amount of calories. And I started to get a little bit homesick. I had a girlfriend at the time.
Okay.
Back in London. She used to work in the snooker hall, so I used to get a few free beers off her now and again, but I really liked her. And at the end of 8 weeks, I got weekend off, we all did, and you go back home. And she said to me, I can't cope with you being away all the time. It's me on the Marines. It was a decision to make. And I chose the Marines. Felt like a strange choice at the time, but looking back.
What was the reaction of your mates when you got back home, or your buddies who you'd left behind for their kind of life?
Yeah, they're in awe.
Of what?
They're in awe of joining the Marines, trying to improve your life, trying to change your personal circumstance. They were all very, very supportive, actually. And a lot of those lads who, I used to go to Millwall Football Club and all those things, a lot of them are still mates. I've just seen a load of them just this last weekend, actually. And you know, they've all gone on to go and do really well in businesses and own businesses and stuff. And even now, even still, almost 40 years later, they're saying, Scotty, you know, you really did make something of yourself and we're really proud of you. It's funny, isn't it, that I was the one out of all of our little group who was least expected to be able to do well because they all had
what's
firm family units.
What's interesting by that comment is that peer group pressure and your peers are probably the major influences when people are young, at 16, 17. Trying to be one of the boys, living up to the crowd and so forth is really important. And a lot of people get into difficulty because they listen to their peers.
Even harder nowadays with the influence of social media and that willingness that everybody needs to be liked in everything that they do. And that pressure for young people is still the same, albeit in a different way, probably.
Sure.
And, I think we need to acknowledge that life can be very difficult for young people, certainly.
Do you think it's possible for you and I, Scotty, for a moment to even begin to understand what it's like to live in their world?
Well, we can try. I do speak to my kids about this as well, but the incredible amount of information that is out there that travels around so at the speed of light,
right,
does have an impact on my children's behaviours and their own thoughts and feelings, because a misplaced message on Instagram or something can really seriously affect young people's mental health, and I'm aware of it, but the magnitude of it is something I'm probably not so aware of because I don't do that.
So if you were a Marine now and actually doing training, are you still allowed to keep your phone and keep contact?
Of course, yeah. Yet we realise that this is modern times, and if you take those things away from young people and take away their ability to be able to speak to a girlfriend or to do a FaceTime or whatever it is, or to be able to relay and share their feelings via different messages and stuff. You take that away from people, then they're going to hold it against you, and they're going to be like, well, this is not the world I want to be in. And we need to understand that technology has changed. We need to move with the times. And over the years, initially, I think when sort of social media and telephone and mobile phones became more abundant, the initial thoughts of the Marines was just to stop it and stop them from doing that. But then we realised that actually, you could have, there's so much to do in Marines training. We can't just allow them willy-nilly to have their phones. And what they incorporated, I don't know if they still do it, probably do. They have certain periods during the evening, I don't know, between, let's say, 9 and 10 o'clock. That would be your social media time. You get given your phone back. You can do all your FaceTimes and stuff and allow people to communicate back at home, because we realise that that's the right thing to do. You can't take away that right, I don't think. If you're in a position where it's going to affect operational capability, secrecy and missions, different story. When we went to Iraq, we had our phones taken off us.
Oh, did you?
Nokia bricks, they were at the time in 2003. And, we didn't see them again for months. But that was a different time and for a different reason. But during training, it's not operational. Our young people need the ability to be able to communicate back home. And actually, I think it probably helps because they get that reinforcement from back home. You can keep it going, you'll be fine. And our core family is not just about the officers and the sergeants and the young recruit. We need wider core family, something we're really proud of. The parents, the teachers, the ones who have influence over young people.
I think it's quite interesting, Scotty, because both of my kids, who have now got their own families, both of them live in Australia. One of them left about 14 years ago, and the other one only left a year ago. Although I did see them because I went out to watch the rugby, and I caught up with them then. And I have to say, it's interesting as a parent, and I'll say it publicly, I miss them.
Yeah, very much so. Putting the boot on the other foot, I often get asked, are any of your kids going to join the military? And our youngest, Charlie, who's 20 now, when he was in his teenage years, he was quite interested in the Marines cadets. Didn't come from me, something that he'd found out about himself and really started to enjoy it. Became a physical training instructor in the cadets, actually.
Oh, okay.
And even though, when he got to a little bit later in his teenage years and found Wine, Women and Song, he sort of went off the idea of the Marines. It did make me and my wife think about, what it would be like if one of our children joined the service. Would let me see what it was maybe like for my family, my wife, the people who loved me, what it must have been like for them when I said that I'm off to a war zone and I'm not really sure if I'm coming back. And that just gave me a little bit of a glimpse of what it must be like to be a parent of a young person who's
an extraordinary conversation to have, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
So here we have you in the vulnerability of all the training and going through the training. When did you actually develop more and more confidence, thinking, oh, this is going quite well, I'm doing okay?
The training's layered and you get an incredible amount of feedback about the qualities and values, and you realise that actually I must be doing something right. And that level of performance, you're assessed physically, you're assessed professionally, you're assessed on the qualities and the values, the mindset, the ethos, the culture, feedbacks non-stop. And I realised I was doing okay. Then I got injured. So
what did you do? You tore a hamstring?
Yeah, rope climbing. I was quite good at that. And most of the strength from rope climbing comes from the legs, actually.
From your feet, yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, I tore a hamstring and I was out the game for 8 weeks, which meant that I came out of my squad. At the time, you feel like it's the end of the world because your squad continues in training without you, and you've got to mark time, if you like, pause until you're better, and then you go back into another squad that sort of caught you up. So, which I did, and subsequently, over the years, I've now got two squads in training that I still keep in touch with, and we had the odd reunion and stuff, so doesn't really matter. But what I do remember from that time is that when I've then since gone on to go and be in a leadership or command responsibility back at Limpstone during our training, remember what it's like for the young recruits who get injured, who fail something, who fail a professional test or something like that, because they're being taken out of their squads as well, like I was many, many years ago. Remember what it's like. Remember how difficult it was. Stand side by side with that young recruit and share your experiences with them and say, look, yes, I know you're gutted that you got to come out of training and go into something we call Hunter Company. It's like it's the rehabilitation sort of recovery arm of our training. And you say to the young recruit, you join the Marines, you've got that aspiration to earn your Green Beret. That aspiration's still there. It's not gone away. Yes, it might be delayed slightly, but you work with me, let's work together, let's get you back fitter, stronger, better prepared, so when you re-enter training, you're going to go and smash it. And most of the young recruits respond really positively to that. You stand side by side with them, you coach and mentor them through, you help them in every way that you can possible. And that's the best of the instructors that I've seen, the ones that really do that, the ones that go the extra mile and understand that these youngsters, in many cases, like me, it's the first time that they've had something so catastrophic happen to them.
But I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. And I think all of us need to learn a very humble lesson from it, Scotty, because there are great psychologists around the world who talk about this, and they talk about sitting in somebody else's chair. And I'm sat here thinking to myself now about you and about all the experience. We're completely different in terms of our backgrounds and how we actually got to here, and that will affect our behaviour and our thought pattern and actually how we do things. And sometimes people don't have that ability to step into other people's shoes or actually live in their world. And I think if you're disappointed, which you would be if you came out of training and you're part of a corps, you've all grown up, you've developed all this mateship around you, it must be tough, really, really tough.
Yeah, I think so. The Marines talk about being the first to understand so you can be the first to adapt and overcome. And that understanding is a critical component. Understanding people, having that empathy to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, definitely. And that helps as you go through the training, because the training is layered and each week's harder than the previous one. And you get to a point in the training when you realise that your collective performance reaches so much higher than any one individual can. and you help each other along. You almost get to a point where you've invested and you've put so much into it that nothing's going to stop you now. You realise that you take responsibility not just for your own performance, but you take ownership of the performance of others around you. You're invested in each other now. You make each other feel valued. You're developing a sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging is something which is critical. Your identity is being shaped, probably for the first time in your life, where you see something bigger than yourself is coming. You're part of it. And you've got pride attached to that. You've got respect attached to that. When you get towards the end of the training, nothing's going to stop you now. They save the hardest for last, of course, the Marines. They throw in the commando tests at the end.
Sure.
There's 4 of them. First one's a 9-mile speed march, carrying all your kit and equipment. You start as a team, you finish as a team. If you don't get in the time, then you all fail together. You have to take responsibility for each other. And it's a team squadded effort. The next one is the Tarzan and Assault course, the one I spoke to you about. It's 2 assault courses together, one of which is 30 feet up in the trees. We had the England rugby team on that. No safety equipment, no helmet. If you fall out the tree and land on your head, it's a bad day at the office, I suppose. You just pick yourself up, climb the tree and get back on with it. And next one is the endurance course, 2.5 miles of underwater tunnels with obstacles such as Peter's Pool, the Sheep Dip, the Crocodile Pit. And the final one is our famous 30-mile march across the entirety of Dartmoor.
The Yomp.
Yeah. From north to south of Dartmoor. Once again, you start as a team and you finish as a team. The Marines demand that you complete each of these 4 commando tests on consecutive days. The end of the longest and the hardest training in the world.
I watch, actually, because as I'm driving home, I sometimes have to stop as they're all coming down to cross the road, and the van is there waiting, and I can see them feeding them pasties and making them eat them whether they want to or not, because that replenishment is so important.
You get through those 4 commando tests, you earn your Green Beret. It's one of the greatest days of my life. Without a doubt. The Marines give you a weekend off, after that.
Really?
It's really nice of them, isn't it?
Do they?
And it's not until you get home you realise that what's just happened,
the significance of it.
It was only a job interview.
Okay.
It was a hard one. But now you're going to be asking you to go on operations and exercises, deployments around the globe, jungles and deserts and mountains. Coldest I've ever been in, with the wind chill, minus 76 degrees Celsius. In northern Svalbard. You spit on the floor and it's ice before it hits the floor, your eyes freeze together from the moisture. Every bit of your body's got to be covered up, otherwise it's going to turn black and die. And this train hard, fight easy continues beyond. You join a commando unit, I joined mine in Plymouth, 4-2 Commando. That Lance Corporal I told you about.
Sure.
He shaped my life, Now you're a trained Marine. Everybody in the unit all got Green Berets. And you go on exercise. I went to deployments in Norway and all over the place. My first tour was of Belfast, Northern Ireland in 1989. I was 19 years old, and that helped to shape me from a boy to a man. There's no doubts about that.
Pretty hairy place.
Really is, yeah. The New Lodge and the Ardoyne, North and West Belfast. And, we had a lad shot, dead, in our troop. His name's Adam Gilbert, and that's still painful, actually. Didn't come home. Could have been any of us. It's not the first time in my career that's happened, and, does bring home some of the consequences being in the Marines, I suppose. And for the first time, for me, definitely, you realise that, whilst you're serving the country and you're very proud to do so, and hopefully, the Marines talk about playing away from home. We'd rather do that. We'd rather protect our interests worldwide away from home, because we don't want foreign soldiers marching down Whitehall or Budley High Street. We don't want that. That's why, if we're going to deploy away, we'd rather do that.
Talk me through, because I remember I was reading your book yesterday. Talk me through the kit sale.
Okay. Yeah, so Marines got a dark sense of humour.
Is that how you cope?
Yeah, I think so. Cheerfulness and adversity. When things get tough, someone will do what we term crack a funny.
Okay.
Make a joke.
Okay.
Have a laugh about it. I think we all need the ability to be able to laugh at ourselves anyway.
Okay.
The Marines do it in a way that some would see as gallows humour, maybe. You know, I remember seeing and hearing of lads who had their legs blown off, and first thing they said was, you know, that's my disco dancing days finished. You know, dark humour, which I think only Marines can understand, maybe. The kit sale you spoke about is something which is internal. I'll only say so much about that because that's something that us Marines
It's close to you as a family.
It's close to us, but ultimately, someone gets killed on operations, then all of their kit and equipment goes on sale. And we have a closed environment whereby there's an auction. Let's say his green beret was auctioned off, and within our unit only, it's only Marines in there, we'd bid for it. 10 quid, 25, 50, 100, 2,000. And then that money goes to the family. Basically all of his kit is auctioned off, and that's a kit sale that we do. It's, we have a few beers.
It's a coping mechanism.
Yes. Something where there's a positive outcome.
Okay.
In regards of there's some support for the family, and it's our way of doing something.
I think the example you give in your book is somebody buying a sock for 1,700 quid, and I'm kind of going, wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's your way of giving back. Might even be a way of being thankful that you returned. Tough, isn't it? But that's part of the life. And we all accept it.
It is, and we all have, and people have tragedies that they have to cope with. They have ups and downs and all sorts of tragedies, and people cope with it, or disappointments or bad news in different kind of ways. And people cope with it in lots of different ways. But I think what comes through so strongly in your book is this protection of the core, the people who you are, and how you all come together.
Yeah, you can talk about it being a family, but then you have to actually do something about it when it really matters, because you can talk about things when things are going great. That's really easy, isn't it? And everything's going swimmingly. But it's during the tough times when people truly need you that's the time that you have to step up. And I think we all acknowledge that, and we'll continue to need to, because that core family stretches out. We don't always get things right, that's for sure. We've all made plenty of mistakes in that regard, but it's not through the lack of effort or the lack of wanting to try to make a difference.
So, Scotty, let me ask you, because I know that's a kind of a sad note, but moving on to a more positive nature, is the admiration to the Marines is incredible. And I know one of the people who admired the Marines phenomenally was Clive Woodward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Clive gets in touch with you guys and says, I want to bring the England rugby team. This is before they went to Australia and the World Cup. I want to bring the whole team to Lympstone.
Yeah, that's right. One of my really good mates, Stevie Hargreaves, he was one of the people that led it, along with, you spoke about him earlier on, Nathan Martin and stuff.
He ended up working for the RFU.
Yeah, he did. He did. And, you know, I remember when they come down, I was one of the PTIs down there who was helped supporting them through the training. And they went through a whole host of evolutions where, you know, put them through their paces. Probably about 2 or 3 out of 10 compared to what we put our Marines through, but that's enough for them. And you know, we weren't trying to train them to be Marines, obviously. The idea was to look at the qualities and values and listen to our experiences and hopefully help them to grow as a team. And, you know, I think that's around that time where leaders of teams realised that those marginal gains are going to make all the difference between getting out of the group in the World Cup and win it. And those little things can make all the difference, because they've all got the best coaches, they've got, you know, physiotherapists, they've got doctors, they've got analysts and stuff. You look at teams now.
But I think Clive, more than anybody else, actually corralled that team of experts around to support them in terms of their effort.
Definitely. He was really open to looking at different organisations and seeing what they could take from it.
Sure.
ultimately, that thinking clearly under pressure, something which Clive talks about in his book, because I've read it as well. But it's not just that; it's leading under, it's leading clearly under pressure. It's performing under pressure as well. And there was a lot of work on that. Ultimately, you take somebody, same as we did with the England football team. You take a team out of their natural, normal environment, because it's very difficult to replicate the pressure on a rugby training field. Very difficult to do that. You take this group out, put them into an alien environment, apply some pressure, and then give them the skills to be able to hopefully overcome, to build a ring of steel together, so that when they go back into their own environment, they've got this feeling of being able to overcome together, and they can take that forwards. I love that moment, and I will sit and look at it again and again. I'm more of a football man, I've got to be honest.
I know you are. I know you're a Millwall fan, but I just remember that moment in the dying seconds of extra time against our arch enemy, the Australians, in the World Cup final. And Johnny.
I just remember that moment. That's not the moment I remember. I remember the moment where England were driving forwards, the seconds were ticking down, and I think the scrum half, I think it's Matt Dawson. He was caught inside the ruck.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And that team, right, have been drilled. They'd done their hard yards. And they knew that they needed to turn the ball over once again so that they could get their best passer, their scrum half, in the right position to be able to then deliver that ball effectively to Johnny Wilkinson. That team truly fought clearly under the greatest of pressure. When I think about their time with the Marines, and I'm sure Clive Woodward and the team have also learned from other industries and organisations so they can add it to their own sort of DNA, if you like. That moment of thinking clearly under the most extreme of pressure almost reminded me of what being in the Marines was like. And they've managed to transfer that into their own environment and then perform at the highest level in the game that meant the most ever.
Sure.
So I was really proud of them. Do you know they come back to Limpstone afterwards, and they were guests of honour at our core boxing champs, one of our best competitions that we do, and it's a wonderful evening, and we don't normally invite external people in, but on that occasion the England rugby team come back, and it was our chance to speak to them, and they were regaling us for their World Cup stories, and it's really wonderful that they made the effort to come and thank us for the work that they'd done, because they clearly felt as though they'd learnt something from their experience with the Marines.
Oh, I think they learned so much, and I think actually, and it's quite interesting, because Clive in his book, which is called Winning, focuses upon winning, and they won.
Most definitely. So this story isn't a secret, but at the end of their visit down to Limpstone,
right,
Clive Woodward did pull a small group of us in and said, look, are there anybody in my team? I'm just about to pick the World Cup team. Are there anybody in his team who we would not have in the Marines? What an interesting question. And,
but
it says a lot about the man, the fact that he was prepared to ask something.
But you phrased it by going, who's not battle ready?
There you go. Who's not going to put a shift in? Who's not that team player? And it's not about being the superstar. And Sir Clive recognised that. I think he wanted the people with the strong values, with the mindset, with the commitment, with the team energy, the ones that were going to give everything they've got, not for themselves, but for others.
But also Clive gives great credit to the Marines about understanding about sappers, about people who suck energy out of a groups, as opposed to those people who bring energy to the groups.
Same in any organisation. What do? You just leave them there to continue to make the environment a toxic one? Or do you do something about it? Much like in the Marines with our initial training, where you can't have people that sap your energy, the ones who are selfish, the ones who are self-centered. I just, personally, if I think of qualities and values, and I look over, a bit far away from here now, but look over to Westminster, at our leaders that we have there, those qualities and values, I would love to see some of them in some of our leaders. And if I saw a leader who demonstrated to me those qualities and values that the England rugby team showed, that the Marines show, then I would follow them.
Okay. Talk to me, I need to understand a little bit, because it's talked about in the book, but it's also talked about in a word that's used, and it's used in business environments a great deal. Talk to me about mindset. What does it mean to you?
Mindset's probably a general term. My way of explaining it is probably it's just how you see things, how you think in regards of what you're going to do. So what you think affects how you feel affects how you act, right? And I think that mindset is that general term in regards of how you perceive certain situations and then what you do next. It's not really what happens that matters, it's what you do next that does. And I think that mindset is like a forward-thinking way of looking at things. You know, we spoke about glass half full or half empty, or maybe, you know, those that say they can and those that say they can't. That's the mindset. And I know that generally the Royal Marines have a mindset within their organisation that is the envy of many around the world. And I believe our commando mindset is something that is underpinned by bedrock values. It always starts with that. I've started speaking about that already to you today, and it always comes back to it. You know, that Green Beret is linked inextricably to our commando mindset, which is underpinned by those values. And I think if you do your best, your very best, to try to live by those qualities, those values, that DNA, those things that mean so much to you, then you will be able to develop a commando mindset. But of course, sometimes things don't go to plan. Sometimes things go wrong. And life can be tough. Our commando mindset then links into our core family. We have a mindset of supporting people who are struggling in certain areas for whatever reason. So when things don't go to plan, and life can kick you down, can't it?
Okay.
It can kick you where you're down. That mindset that we've got is that we don't leave a Marine behind. We all come together, support the person that needs that, literally, metaphorically support them back off the floor, and then we go forward. We address whatever situation it is, and then we drive forwards together. That mindset, that family ethos, is something I'm yet to see in any other organisation to the extent of the Marines. Something that we're really proud of, and I think that underpins everything that we do.
Undermining it all there, Scotty, is your belief that if you change the way you think, then you can change the way you behave.
I think that's about right. I think that would explain it well.
I think in terms of that thinking and the discipline that goes with that thinking and the direction that goes with that thinking, it gives people purpose, it gets them up. You keep talking about getting up in the morning and having purpose about what you're doing and about where you're going, which direction you're going in. And I often say to organisations when I'm working with them, do you know what is true north? Do they know the direction that they're actually going in? Are they sure about what they're actually doing? Because if you're not, you're running around like a headless chicken.
Exactly right. It's not the destination that really matters, it's the journey that you go along to get there. Right, exactly as you've just said.
And a lovely analogy that somebody gave to me once was to say, if you aim to go to the moon, you don't go, oh, put the coordinates in and we're going to the moon. You actually change course a lot on the way there. And actually changing course is part, you have up days, good days, bad days, things go wrong. You have to readjust in terms of what you're doing.
No doubts about it. Sometimes you have to aim far away to be able to get you to where you need to go. But that comes with experience as well, I think. And having experienced people around you, that's why we have these leaders at every level that I was just speaking about. Because most of the time, people have had an experience whereby you're going through it for the first time, and you feel comfortable in asking people, saying, look, you know, have you ever come across this before? Because I'm having a bit of a struggle about what to do. And that experience and knowledge will come in and say, oh, yeah, I've had exactly that sort of thing. And what I did this, and it didn't turn out very well. So don't do that. But what I subsequently did was I did it in this way, and I got a much better outcome. It's almost what I'd call a legacy. I mean, you're a rugby man, so I'm sure you would have read James Kerr's book about the New Zealand rugby team.
Sure. But it's a way of life. It's a religion.
I've got a dear friend called Owen Eastwood, who's a fantastic guy. He's a New Zealander, and he's worked with some of the best teams in the world and continues to do so. He's written a book called Belonging, actually, and I recommend that one to you for sure. But I've worked really closely with him, and he's actually become a mentor in the speaking business for me, as somebody who's given a lot of his time and helped put me on the right track with this new type of work since leaving. That aspect of the Marines whereby he came to visit. I invited him to one of our King Squad pass-out days, and he said, Scotty, he said, the feeling that I get from this, the core family, the camaraderie, the respect, the pride, he said, it reminds me of the New Zealand rugby team, whereby they all understand that if you're privileged enough to be part of this team, you do whatever you're doing within it, but when you leave, by the time you leave, your goal is to have made that team better in some way, to have made an improvement, to have left your own legacy or left your own mark. And interesting, somebody who's got first-hand experience of working with a New Zealand rugby team, he aligned the Marines to that. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll take that, because, we're talking about arguably the greatest sports team in history.
We have to actually give credit to the fact, and we have to credit the fact that South Africa have just beaten them. But so you have good days and bad days, but they have just beaten them, which is incredibly unusual, because the All Blacks, when they come on the pitch, the haka and everything that goes with it, the tradition, the Maori tradition of the haka and being together, and also understanding in rugby terms, right, New Zealand playing rugby, and rugby is like a religion in New Zealand itself, as it is in Wales. It used to be in Wales.
I'm sure they're not doing so well either at the moment.
I could relate a story to you of being invited, and I went to referee at Cardiff. And I arrive at Cardiff, and somebody takes me over to one of the people who's wearing a hat, and he's got a big coat on, and they kind of go, oh, I'm really excited. This is Martin Humphreys, who's come to referee today's game from Notts, Links and Derby. And he lifted his head up a little bit and looked at me and went, why? And I went, so in that moment, it's kind of welcome to Wales.
Yeah.
It's understanding. Yeah. It's understanding. It's imbued and part of their culture. I'm intrigued, actually, about this influence of culture, because we all talk about culture, but we often know little about it or understand very little about it. And we don't actually recognise the other cultures. I mean, Great Britain is a multicultural society with all sorts of different people with traditions, behaviour in different cultures.
Definitely. Multicultural, multinational. And, I know there's a huge amount of discussion about this. What I can tell you is that I've seen so much hatred in the world.
Yeah.
I've seen so much abuse. Some of these war-torn places, horrendous, that I've truly got to a point where I no longer see borders, religions, cultures, colours or creeds. And I don't really care about it. I just see people. And I know that there's good and bad in all. Mostly good, I'm pleased to say. And no matter where you go, I've just been in Kenya recently, some incredible people out there, some really, really joyous.
We were sharing stories
really
about
joyous
that
people,
area,
but, having been to some of the war-torn countries, I don't care what religion you are, I don't care what orientation you are, I don't care what gender you are. The Marines talk about, if you're good enough, you're good enough. You deserve the right to be there, you've earned it.
But you don't judge.
I'm at that point now in my life. I think once upon a time I probably did. But now I'm at that point where I've seen enough of this world to be able to say, do you know what, I will take every single person, irrelevant of orientation, colour, breed, don't care. I don't care where somebody's from. I do care about what they do and how they do it.
I think it's quite interesting, actually, because it is due to experience. And unfortunately for some people, they've never been anywhere else or done anything else. And I mean, unfortunately, so therefore they don't have that opportunity to develop that empathy and sympathy towards those other people.
It's an informed choice.
Yeah. So, for example, Scotty, I was very lucky. I grew up with my mum and dad living in Hong Kong. So I travelled out to Hong Kong, and also they then moved from there to Pakistan, and we were right up in the north of Pakistan. So I went out to Pakistan when I was younger, and actually it's interesting because I was not offended, but it caught my eye straight away when you're described as a black officer.
Yeah.
I kind of go, whose convenience is that for?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to you.
No, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't. Strangely enough, I'm half white and half black, so, mixed race. I think in my upbringing, terminology is important, but probably was less important during my formative years as a young person.
Did you ever get prejudice when you were younger?
Very little.
Okay. And your reaction to it was?
If we talk about being in the Marines, I remember I stood up once as a young teenage lad to a bit of a bully, and we had a bit of a rumble, and then there was less then. There was less prejudice. I've probably experienced very little in regards to other people who come from my background. Of course, I should have brought my Green Beret with me today, but I can tell you what it means to me. Every person that's ever earned their Green Beret, it will mean something slightly different to them. And while we're having this conversation, I've just introduced it. Do you know what my Green Beret means to me? And it's not a buzzword for me. Diversity. And the reason I can say that is because I promise you in my hand and my heart that no Marine has ever once judged me on the colour of my skin, my background, or where I'm from. But like I just said, what they will judge me on is what I do and how I do it. Every single day.
Every second.
Every second of every day that's inextricably linked to the qualities, the values, the mindset, the ethos, and the culture of the Marines that's linked to this little bit of green cloth that we hold so dear. Truth is, you cut me open and I'm green inside. Just like that.
I think, actually, it's very, very hard for some other people to step inside and understand how you feel in that situation. But I am going to make one thing which will make you smile, is that you sent me a message this morning, and I think in terms of social media, and you used thumbs up, which personally, I'm going to tell you, I hate. Yeah. But you also didn't just do thumbs up. You did the emoji, which is slightly coloured, and made me smile. I thought, even Scotty's influenced by it now.
It was accompanied with a message, I seem to recall. It wasn't just the thumbs up, though, was it? But
no, it was great.
But, and communication's key, isn't it, as well? And communication, collaboration, cooperation, or something.
I think more important than that actually is listening. I don't think people listen.
Agreed.
I don't think they listen. They talk a lot. They espouse a lot about what they think and how they feel, but they don't listen. They don't listen to understand. Can you accept? Can you understand? And do you really listen?
This is something that's critical to our leadership, I would say.
Absolutely.
In regards of what I've noticed. Let's say, in the Marines, we change jobs every couple of years. They like you to have a breadth of different jobs. I've been an adjutant, section commander, worked in training, all these different areas, a job in the media and stuff. And every time I've gone to a new job, certainly in the sort of last 10 years of my service, I had a position of responsibility in charge of hundreds of Marines. And some of those Marines are, some are lance corporals and sergeants and colour sergeants and sergeant majors and captains and lieutenants. As a major, that's what you're in charge of. So bring all my command team in one at a time. In fact, it's important to make time for everybody within the organisation. And the first couple of weeks is normally spent sat interviewing each person, some of which I knew from before and some of which I don't. Normally bring them in, say, oh, look, good to see you again, and we have a shake of hands and say, Scotty, good to see you and stuff. And this is why I listen. I could have just gone straight in. I've seen a really good officer do this style of engagement before, and they realise that leadership is about people. It's not about doing stuff and tasks and how you do it. It's about leadership. How do you lead your people? Well, you bring them in, you make them feel valued. You speak to them and you say, look,
and you listen.
And how can I help you? How's your family doing? And you show a little bit of interest, and then you listen. They might have some really good ideas that they speak to you about, and you think, oh, do you know what? That's a really good idea. Let's implement that, or let's look to implement it and act on your good ideas. And I think when you listen to people, when you act on their good ideas, when you make them feel valued and part of a team, you get the very best out of them. I think that's really effective leadership, and that's leadership that I've learned from others along the way. Taken some of the best bits out of their leadership and incorporated into my own, whereby you listen and you inspire and you get the very best out of your people.
The only thing I would say, actually, back to you, is listening, and that ability to listen is something you need to learn. And people don't generally listen that well.
Too in love with the sound of their own voice.
I know. There's a great danger of us violently agreeing. But at the same time, I think it's so critical and so important. I actually, when I'd finished, and I almost not finished, but I got to a stage where I sat down one day and I thought, I'm going to write a book. And it's called The Only Behaviour You Control Is Your Own. And I wrote the book because, in some ways, it was driven by frustration. And it was a frustration of actually trying to cope with my dad. My dad was an alcoholic. And when he was drinking, and when we were actually in a really difficult situation, I suddenly realised for the first time in my life that nothing I did, I could threaten him, I could do all the things I wanted to do, was going to change his behaviour. The only one who was going to change his behaviour was him.
Absolutely.
But that's really a hard lesson to learn. It was a tough gig to go through. He went through a period of time. He had an accident, inevitably got breathalyzed, lost his driving licence, and subsequently went to see a psychologist. And I don't know what happened in that interview, but he came back and he never drank again.
Oftentimes, that behaviour you're talking about, obviously got to a position where he did start to listen and things started to change.
Sure.
When you don't listen, often you make the same mistakes over and over again. It's almost pointless having these experiences in life unless you do learn from them.
Sure.
Otherwise, you just continue with the same cycle without seeing any growth and any improvement. And that leadership and listening, it's so critical because you've got other experience in your team around you that if you combined all of their different skill sets, you can make such an effective team. And we're talking about high performance at a new level. But of course, there are teams that I've worked with, which should remain nameless, where, organisations with thousands of people in it, where there's only one person making all the decisions. That's the person at the top who doesn't delegate, who micromanages, who likes the sound of their own voice, who doesn't listen. And who then causes an environment where you're not getting the best out of your people. You're certainly not getting their innovation and ideas and effort because they try to speak to you initially. And if as a top leader, you're not listening, well, the well will dry up.
Sure.
They'll be like, you're not listening to me. Why should I continue to invest my time into this?
If we talk about performance, one of the words that comes up, and it comes up quite a bit in your book, is elite. Elite athletes, elite performance, people who are really at the top of their tree in terms of what they do. What do you think are the characteristics of people who are or would fall into that category of being elite?
Yeah, interesting. I don't describe the Marines as elite. I wouldn't use that word on them, but I do talk about elite performers, elite sports people, because that's sort of describes the level that they're at, if you like. In regards of your question, what does elite mean? I think it's probably an aspiration of something you're trying to reach. Of course, I work with a lot of sports people, and I've worked with a few sports academies as well, and I see young people who have an aspiration to work within a business, sports team, who realise that by getting to the top, they will have to show consistent, repeatable, elite levels of performance.
Okay.
Nothing else will be acceptable. Probably just one way of looking at it, just speaking off the hoof now.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's a word you have to be careful with, I think. Because, a team, of course, can be perceived as elite when they're not. You have to be careful about how you describe that. And about what that actually means to the people who work within it.
It's very hard sometimes to actually look at the examples that we've got all around in all sorts of situations. And I'm back to thinking about, the rugby team, the World Cup rugby team coming, and all the players and all the characters, because it's described beautifully by Clive about Austin Healey and Matt Dawson arriving in Hawaii shirts, sunglasses, shorts and so forth, as though they're going on a summer holiday, actually at Lympstone, and walking past Clive. And there's a huge shout because Dawson walks by, and Clive, who by this stage has now got a golf bag over his shoulder at the Lympstone Marine Camp, walks past, and they tackle him or they challenge him about what it is that he's doing. And Healy is in the car park jumping up and down because he's just won 50 quid on a bet that he wouldn't get past the front gate, actually, at that stage. You can imagine that scene. And the nice thing is, which is lovely, Scotty, is that several of the Marines around found it quite amusing.
Yeah, of course. Of course, that's our sense of humour anyway. Sometimes that cheerfulness and adversity can help to break the ice. I think that's what it does as well when you're in a situation. Think, okay, I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, or what even I'm walking myself into, but let's have a bit of a laugh and go in with a smile.
Right.
I think that's that.
I think the problem was
that's a very Marine outlook, actually.
The challenge for them was they had no idea what they were going into, and they went through an incredibly tough regime, which Clive talks about in detail. And one of the guys who was part of the team from the Marines, Nathan, actually went on to become part of the support team, helping the England rugby team as well.
Dislocation of expectation, put people in situations where they can't control it, and then apply a little bit of pressure and see what happens. Help them to overcome so that that's a positive experience that they can have. And of course, it could go the other way, and you have to then use your experience to make sure that they get the most out of it, because that's exactly what they came down for. They want to be able to harness.
Would your experience say then that most organisations that you've come across or dealt with have sappers in them who are sucking the energy out of those organisations?
Yeah, I'd probably not worked that closely with any of the organisations over a period of weeks, probably days and weeks and months, to be able to say that definitively. But I do know from sort of arranging the different briefing calls and getting a little bit of an idea about an organisation, I do know that they have various challenges. Challenges like when they're trying to incorporate change within an organisation, and the difficulties of that. That age-old saying of we've always done it like this, so why would we change? And of course, as I spoke about the Marines earlier on, the most forward-thinking, adaptive organisations realise that the only constant in life is change.
I was part of a program with General Motors, and the big saying that we used was, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
I love that. I'm going to steal that.
Right? And in terms of doing it, that was the mantra that we used all the way through that entire program.
Interestingly, in the Marines, before I joined in 1982, I know that John Knott was the Defence Secretary, and he was looking at disbanding the Marines. The Marines have had this challenge many times over the years, and obviously the Falklands happened, which was in that way quite useful for us. But then I think the Marines switched on from then on and realised that they have to be a forward-thinking, adaptive organisation that's on the front foot, that can change quickly depending on the current threats of the day, to make ourselves a relevant organisation that has the right capability.
We'll move on to what will become your favourite subject, I know, which will be football.
Yay!
And also, it's something that I've watched right from afar and admired from afar, and I admire always the management skills and abilities, and Gareth Southgate is probably one of the prime examples of being able to do that. And we'll talk about Gareth Southgate in a few moments, okay?
Brilliant. I look forward to it.